and we'll start with our favorite future. So, Nick, I'm going to just turn it over right to you. If you had to bet one team right now to win the Stanley Cup, who would it be?
If I had to bet one team right now, I think just based off price, I would go with the Flames, just because the upside is there. And I think outside of kind of some of the chalkier ones, they're definitely a team that I could see being better than what they were last year, which was already really strong. And yeah, I think there's value there at 18-1.
Yeah, I like the Flames if I was betting at the top. The one team that I would, if I can only pick one, that'd be the Washington Capitals. That's your team. You're a Capitals fan. Last year, the Capitals kind of just coasted their way into the playoffs like everybody else in the East. The Eastern Conference playoff picture was basically set around the holidays. So there's never any real impetus for the Capitals to charge up the standings, or there was no team nipping at their heels. The Islanders cut it to like 9 points at one point in March, and that was as close as they got. So it was just a weird season. And then they got to the playoffs and they showed that they're just going to be a tough out. Peter Laviolette is good at doing that with teams. He's a coach who gets his teams playing a good structured, layered defense. And they did all this. They finished 11th in goals against, 10th in expected goals against, and 12th in high danger chances allowed at 5-on-5. They did all this despite inconsistent goaltending. I don't want to say bad because I don't think it was, this, we're not talking like bottom of the bin goaltending from Vanacek and Samsonov, but they upgraded. Darcy Kemper was really, really good during the regular season last year. I think a lot of people are putting way too much stock into what they saw out of him in the playoffs when he got hurt, and just kind of had some weird form. But they also added some interesting pieces to that top six with Dylan Strome and Connor Brown. They've got a couple young players, Hendrix Lapierre and Connor McMichael, who can make a difference. Anthony Mantha should be healthy. When he came into the lineup, they became a better team. And the top of the roster is still good. Evgeny Kuznetsov had a good bounce back season last year. We know Ovechkin, I mean, he scored 50 as a 36-year-old last year. He's absurd. So they just tick every box, and they're 40-1. This is a team that rarely flies under the radar going into the year because they've just been so good for so long. 14 out of the last 16 seasons, they finished first or second in their division. And now you're gonna get them at 40-1. I think the East is wide open. It's almost like when you're handicapping a tennis tournament or March Madness or the World Cup, like there's always that group of death, and like the Metro and the Eastern Conference feel like that, where all these teams will just beat up on each other all season and then into the playoffs. And I can easily see a world where the Capitals are the last team standing just because of how kind of steady they are. So I like 40-1 on Washington. Any thoughts on your Caps?
For sure. Yeah, I think there are a lot of positives heading into this year. Like, as a fan, that series versus Florida really hurt because there's just so many games and moments we were just watching like, how did this just happen? They should have won the series or whatever. At least, it was a tough one to take, but there were so many positives to build on. I think the defense core, they're really good at driving play up the ice. And I think the defense core altogether is pretty underrated. And there's a pretty good chance that they can be as strong as they were last year this season, especially if some of the guys, maybe Martin Ferravari has a bigger season. I think there are a lot of pros, not to try and be too much of a homer, but, and if Darcy Kemper comes in and plays like a true number one, that's obviously going to be a big boost because, yeah, like you said, they had middling goaltending at best. So if Kemper comes in and makes a big difference on that front. And then the other thing is, it's unclear what's going to happen with Nick Backstrom, but Dylan Strome is quite likely to give more than they got from Backstrom last year, who was really, really ailing. Maybe there's some configuration where it sounds like Backstrom's last hip surgery is helping. There's a possibility maybe down the stretch he gets in and is a difference maker. And then if you have him rolling and Strome making a difference, suddenly the top three centers look a lot deeper again. So I think there's a lot of upside for sure.
A couple other Stanley Cup futures I am interested in. I'm a sucker for this team. The St. Louis Blues are 40-1 as well. They lost David Perron, but I'm not too concerned about the forward group being much worse because they're still so deep, right? Pavel Buchnevich was a revelation last year. Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou were as well, and they're both just entering their prime. Buchnevich is squarely in the middle of his. They have a great two-way center in Ryan O'Reilly. Braden Shen is continuing to be a really reliable NHL producer. So the defense, I like the group overall. It's maybe a little thin, but this is a 40-1 team for a reason. And it's really a bet on Jordan Binnington. Everyone seems to have soured on him. I get it because he did struggle last regular season, but I think it was just like, it could have been a confluence of circumstances with losing his job to Husso. He's such a mercurial guy, and he's such a polarizing player that I could just see him now that he knows he's gonna be playing 50 games at least. Getting back into form. He was good the 2 previous seasons before that. Obviously, he had that historic run in the playoff, the year that they won the Stanley Cup. So with this forward group, they should be able to outscore their problems and give Jordan Binnington the runway he needs to find his form. So I like the Blues at 40-1. Another team I'll keep my eye on is the Bruins. Once again, another team I'm a sucker for. They're 28-1 right now. They're going to be missing Charlie McAvoy, Brad Marchand, Matt Grzelcyk, I believe Mike Riley as well, out of the gate to start the season. That's your number 1 defenseman, your best winger, and a number 2 or 3 defenseman. That's not good. They're also breaking in a new coach, Jim Montgomery, for the first time in a long time. And you could still ask questions of the goaltending tandem of Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark. All that sounds like I'm making an argument against the Bruins, but my point is, it's going to probably take some time for this team to find its form. And if they're 28-1 right now, we could be looking at them, if they get off to like even a middling start, at like 40-1 in a couple weeks into the season. So it's just a team to have circled. I think that the Bruins, even at 28-1 right now, are not a bad bet. If once they get these guys going, they're going to probably be one of the best 5-on-5 teams in the league. They've been one of the best defensive teams in the NHL for 6 or 7 seasons now. So I'm not too worried about the coaching change just ruining that. And you got hopefully a coach that lets them breathe a little bit more in the offensive zone. So I like the Bruins. And then the last one I'll mention, and it's a homer pick, is the Islanders at 40-1. They're, I would say, like the most polarizing team in the betting market going into the year. You have a lot of people who are backing them to have a bounce back year based on what they saw out of the team the 3 previous seasons to last, when everything went wrong. It was a Murphy's Law season. They didn't play well, but they did deal with a ton of off-ice stuff. They have the goaltending. Their defense core is really good, and they have enough depth at forward. So if Matt Barzal can become a legitimate number 1 center and become a star, maybe have a star turn season, they'll be dangerous. And just remember, like, this team was around like 18-1 going into last year. The roster just has not changed enough. The coach has, of course, which is another problem entirely. So you're going to see a lot of people on both sides of that camp. Some that think the Islanders, the window's completely shut, and some that think that this team will bounce back, and that's putting a little bit of value on them. 40-1 on a team that, like I said, was 18-1 last year and was a very trendy Stanley Cup pick, which is really still strange for me as an Islander fan when people were picking them to win the cup. So they're back in their natural state of having a chip on their shoulder. So the Isles, the Blues, the Bruins, and the Caps, those are the 4 teams I've circled. I kind of like the Flames as well. Any other teams you want to get into?
I'm not entirely sure if I want to get into it and bear the brunt of what I think you're usually getting into with this team, but I think I'm one of the few people who actually like the Leafs at plus 1,000 to win the cup. I think they just have so much upside. I know the huge knock against that pick is going to be that if the goaltenders end up being a disaster, you're going to find a way bigger number really quick. I think the opposite end of that spectrum, though, is they're going to start really solid a lot of the time, and you might not even see 10-1. And as much as people hate them, they want to talk about the prior failures. I really think the core that they have is on par with any of the top teams in the league. So I think getting them at 10-1 to start the season is still a strong play. Enough so that I'm willing to wear the hate if it's come out of the gate struggling, because I know people would love to get on me for that. As I saw last year, I put a lot of speak into thinking that last year could be the year and that they're actually legitimate. And I'm going to stand by that. I thought their playoff was really impressive, and a lot of the time they could have ended up with a better result against Tampa. Maybe they don't play Tampa in round 1. They probably win 2 rounds, I think, a lot of the time. So I'm going to stick by the Leafs.
Yeah, I mean, this is the funny thing about Toronto is, like, I'll catch a lot of hate for being anti-Toronto, and as a fan, I am. Like, I'll be honest. Like, what John Tavares did ruined the Leafs, and the fact that just the way they're covered in the media. Like, it's not hard to hate them for me, but from a betting standpoint, I just find them to be so overvalued, because I think that this season, probably compared to last year and especially the season before last, the margin for error is just so much thinner for the Leafs. Like the 2 seasons ago, they were in that division where they could have, if they wanted to, played 41 games of Marner and Matthews, or half a season, whatever it was, 28 that season would have been. And they still would have won that division going away because of the competition that was in there. Then last season, like I was saying with the Capitals, the playoff race was just settled. So they were basically in this weird kind of pace yourself mode for 3/4 of the season, where the thing that really mattered the most to them was trying to win the division, but the Panthers kind of had that wrapped up as well. And so the thing that mattered the most was really like Austin Matthews' goal streak, or goal record. And so without the competition, there was just really there was a wide margin for error, is what I'm trying to say. And this year, with teams like Boston, Tampa, and Florida still there, I think all 4 of the teams at the top of the Atlantic either went lateral or took a step back. But 2 teams that definitely took a significant step forward are Detroit and Ottawa. So there's just not going to be as many free points against those teams. Then you have Buffalo, who they're not going to be a playoff team, but they also got better. And I think Montreal got better. So the division itself is going to be better. Right away, that just kind of shrinks your margin for error. And then you got the Leafs, they're up against the cap because of the way they've structured their roster around their 4 big players. So you're looking already with them having injuries to Timothy Liljegren and Jake Muzzin and the Rasmus Sandin holdout, Victor Mete and Jordy Ben already starting. Like, they could be opening night players. And then you got the goaltending, which, sure, if you're listening to this show, you've heard all about with Murray and Samsonov. That can go one of a million different ways. So I just think that there's enough, there are enough knocks that this team should be longer. I think every team in the East, if you're looking at like true fair odds, I think there should be no team in the Eastern Conference that should be like 15-1 or shorter.
Yeah, I think I see the line of thinking there. I'm going to trust it. I think they're coming out. They got those top gunners that are better than everyone else's guys, like Matthews, Marner, Nylander. Tavares has dropped off, but still. Sure. And I just think for all the talk, I have a feeling it's just going to come out where they play really well and the number doesn't really get much longer. And personally, the other thing that I don't mind, I've seen firsthand a lot, Samsonov can be really good. Yep. So he could be a really reasonable backup option. And then the other note that I think is kind of obvious to say, but we saw last year their goaltending situation got really, really ugly. And everyone loved to point it out at the time. And now they shipped Campbell off to Edmonton. And it seems like a lot of those people are now backing him like he's some sort of, top player. And I think there is the upside, but I can see the narrative where it's a disaster and this ends up being a bad pick. But yeah, personally, I think 10-1 is going to be reasonable. I think they're one of the teams that's locked in to be a top team this season.
The Oilers and the Campbell thing, I think you're right. Like, that's a great point, is the way that situation bared out, with Campbell being great in the first couple months of the season, terrible in the middle part, and then pretty well. He played pretty well in the playoffs as well. He definitely wasn't the reason they lost to the Lightning in that close 7-game series. He's probably a slightly above average goaltender in his best season, and he's probably like a slightly below average goaltender in his worst season. That said, I think the way I would look at it, and I like to do this with the team like the Leafs, you can do it with a lot of big market teams in other sports as well, as had a smaller market team. So when the Ottawa Senators signed Matt Murray or traded for Matt Murray from the Penguins, it was lampooned. When the Sabres tried to trade for Matt Murray and then Murray vetoed it, everyone made fun of the Sabres for even trying to do it. And then when the Leafs did it, the narrative kind of swayed to like, oh, I can kind of see this working. I think Samsonov ends up playing more. He's just got the off-ice stuff. So I think, it's a stay away team for me. It's a team I'll probably be betting against. I think that they're just typically, because of their stature, you're always paying sort of a Leaf tax. The Oilers are another team too, like that. It's not that I'm selling them. I just don't think that they are worth a bet at this number. I think you'll probably be able to keep this number will stick around. Whereas the Flames, you can naturally put those two teams together because of the Battle of Alberta. While the Oilers kind of tick most boxes, the Flames tick every box that you want in a Stanley Cup contender. So if you're looking for a team below 20-1 with a more reasonable chance than the 40-1s I was talking about. I think the Flames are definitely the one to target.